The joint military attacks by the United States and Israel come just hours after failed nuclear negotiations between Tehran and Washington wrapped up without any breakthrough in Geneva. Donald Trump says the strikes aim to cripple the regime, enabling its opponents inside Iran to topple their government.
Within hours of the first strikes on Iran, pro-government demonstrators were out in the streets of the capital, Tehran, vowing retaliation.
The US and Israel attacked us, but they've made a grave mistake. Israel will certainly collapse, and the Iranian nation will undoubtedly prevail. This is a struggle between truth and falsehood, and truth always prevails.
No one supports the US, and they shouldn't count on Iranians for support.
But that's exactly what the United States and Israel are counting on, that the people of Iran will finish what they have started.
Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations.
Israel's public broadcaster confirms Iran's supreme leader was among those targeted in the strikes. In his own televised address, Israel's prime minister appealed directly to the Iranian people, telling them to look to the skies. Quote, help has arrived.
We will create conditions that will enable the brave Iranian people to throw off the yoke of this murderous regime. This is your opportunity to establish a new and free Iran. Take your destiny into your own hands.
There are unverified images circulating on social media of people celebrating the strikes in Iran. But asking them to revolt against the Iranian regime, that's a tall ask, according to some experts.
And relying on the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow the government. Well, I mean, good luck with that. The Iranian military and the IRGC are prepared to use horrible lethal force to put down any sort of uprising. So.
He also says the government is built to withstand attacks on its leadership.
Iran is such a complicated case, though. They have built up a government system that is designed to be resilient in the face of assassinations. It's designed to be coup-proof. Even if you kill, for instance, their political leaders, quote unquote, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards might take over the government. We might end up with a more hostile government at the end of these attacks.
Israel and America's major combat operation against Iran, as Donald Trump calls it, is also a major gamble.
Well, let's speak now to Sina Azodi. He is Assistant Professor of Middle East Politics at Elliott School of International Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us here on DW again. Ayatollah Khamenei is dead. What does this mean for Iran?
Well, Iranians have been strongly denying this, but assuming that he's dead, there is a constitutional process for this. That means that there's an assembly of experts which would convene and would appoint the next supreme leader in the country. In the meantime, I don't know who will take charge of the country. There could be a council of clergy, a high-ranking clergy that could do this. Or for the time being, the Supreme National Security Council would take charge. But the Islamic Republic has a constitution and they have processes for situations like this.
And how big of a blow is this realistically for the Iranian regime?
I don't expect a regime change or a regime collapse because the system is quite resilient. But I also think that the removal of Ayatollah Khamenei, if confirmed 100%, will be a blow to the Islamic Republic because he has had the job for the past 37 years. He's quite experienced and knows how to do the job. By the time they appoint a new supreme leader, he will have to basically socialize in the position, learn things, and then he can assume power. Again, I don't expect a regime change, although it can happen, but I still think that this is a major blow to the Islamic Republic.
And if this is 100% confirmed, how do you think the Iranian people will view this?
Well, from what I'm seeing now, a lot of people are happy. Ayatollah Khamenei was a ruthless dictator, and majority of Iranians didn't like him. I'm sure he has a constituency that still supports him, perhaps 15%, maybe 20%, but it's not much. But he lived a life where people ended up cheering his demise. So from my perspective, Iranians are quite happy, and the things that I'm hearing from Iran, people are actually cheering after his death. So yes.
And the Israeli Prime Minister has said that this war will continue for as long as it's necessary. What does that actually mean? And also, can Iran continue to retaliate long term?
I believe that Iranians have, unlike the June 2025 war, they're quite well prepared in terms of even succession, dispersing the officials and everything. Iran can continue this, but I think their perspective is that they will show a very strong response, as they have so far, to put pressure on the Arab leaders to force President Trump to end the war quite quickly. Now, this is where I think the Israeli and American interests diverge. I believe that President Trump would be interested in a regime change very quickly. But from the perspective of Israelis, at least one of their former negotiators had suggested that for Israel, the best scenario is not a regime change, but rather chaos in Iran. And we saw what happened in southern Lebanon and Syria. That, I think, it would be the best or the ideal scenario for the Israelis. But from the perspective of Americans, I think that regime change would be the best possible outcome.
I mean, that definitely seems to be what Donald Trump is pushing for. He's told the Iranian people that Ayatollah's death is their chance to take over the country. Do you see people claiming the streets and toppling the government?
Well, so far, I have not seen any movement in a sense that they would try to topple the regime. I also, based on the history of air campaigns, we know that decapitation strikes, including what happened in Libya, or longer campaigns, such as what happened in Japan during World War II, or Serbia in 1990s, or Iraq in 1990s, don't ultimately bring a regime collapse or regime changes. Because once the bombs start falling, people tend to take shelter instead of coming to the streets. So I don't expect that happening, although, again, as one of the first rules of international politics, anything can happen.
Of course. Sina Azodi, Assistant Professor of Middle East Politics at Elliott School of International Affairs. Thank you so much for your analysis there.
Thank you for having me.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by Mehrzad Boroujerdi, an Iran expert and the Vice Provost and Dean of College of Arts, Sciences and Education at Missouri University. It's great to have you with us here on DW. President Trump has called on the Iranian people to rise up and topple the government. But what's the likelihood of them actually taking to the streets?
Thanks for having me. Well, this is a rather welcome development in a way, this demise of the Iranian supreme leader. And surely that has, strengthened the desire of many Iranians who, want to see the downfall of this regime to now try to, perhaps challenge it in a more serious fashion, considering the massacre that we witnessed just, last month by the regime. But it's not quite clear exactly how this scenario is going to work. We have not had too many successful cases of regime change brought about by aerial bombardments. One can think of a case like Libya, but even in Libya, we had an opposition force that was on the ground, was active in certain part of the country, and then thanks to the air cover, was able to come and overthrow Mr. Gaddafi's regime. We don't necessarily have that scenario in Iran, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards, might stand to benefit from the fact that now, they are less in the shadow of the clerics. They are no longer, considered just as the bodyguards of the clerics. They have become their own men in a way, and so that's one issue that is worth thinking about. The second one that makes you wonder whether there should be any, why we should avoid some premature euphoria about regime change, is the fact that we don't quite have an alternative opposition. So when President Trump talks about Iranian military officers defecting, exactly to whom? Because there is not a unified opposition that can provide security. There is not a government in waiting that can embrace those type of defectors. Now, keep in mind, all of this is happening in a country that is twice the size of Afghanistan and Iraq combined, with even more people, 90 million people. So it's not really quite clear the day after scenario what Israel and U.S. politicians have in mind.
So with that in mind, perhaps you can tell us your opinion on who you think is likely to be the Ayatollah's successor. We're hearing reports that many of his family members were also killed in the strikes. Where does that leave the regime?
Right. So there is an institution in the country called the Assembly of Religious Experts, a group of some 80, white bearded men who are supposed to choose the next leader. It's not clear whether they have already met in secret and decided on a supreme leader, the next person, or are they going to be planning to meet? Well, of course, that's going to have be a logistical nightmare because they can be bombarded in one setting, right? So whether it's done online or whatever, it's not quite clear. But if Ayatollah Khamenei is dead, I think the regime will sooner or later, announce that fact and declare someone as the next person. It's likely that in this vacuum that has been created, we might witness the Revolutionary Guards invoking the argument of emergency situation and saying, instead of going through that regular routine, let us run the country for a while until we have dealt with our enemies. And we have a more normal settings in order to decide on this type of issues.
Mehrzad Boroujerdi, thank you so much for that analysis there.
Thank you.
It's great to welcome Hussein Banai now, an Associate Professor of International Studies at Indiana University. Welcome to you. The United States has said this is going to be a multi-day campaign. How long do you expect these strikes and counterstrikes could last?
Well, we have to see what the results of the initial couple of rounds are. If there is indeed leadership decapitation that succeeds along the timelines that American and Israeli military commanders have in mind, then I think this could wrap up by midweek, the air attacks. But if the Iranian defenses hold up, and there is in fact a multi-layered plan in place by the Iranian leadership to hit back effectively and establish some sort of credible deterrence, then I think this could drag on for quite some time.
In both of those situations, if it wraps up within a few days or if it's prolonged, what consequences could either of those situations have for the region?
Well, instability in the short term, for sure. I think there's no quick path to establishing a credible government in Iran. So we're looking at a prolonged period of instability to begin with. There are pockets of resistance that are bound to pop up, even if the leadership is effectively decapitated over the course of the next few days. And it's unclear what the post-war planning is for those scenarios, both from Washington's perspectives or Israeli perspectives. In the long run, I think we're looking at a period in which, at best, we're looking at very unstable transition, and at worst, a kind of a widening war to other countries and perhaps even threat of civil conflict inside Iran.
Donald Trump said last year that Iran's nuclear capabilities had been destroyed during the 12-day war in June. So what's the reasoning for these strikes now?
Well, clearly that wasn't factually correct. If they're going to go back to eliminate Iran's nuclear program, and they had said that it was obliterated in June, clearly the objectives of the June war were not as stated by the president back then. There's also the issue of if the aim was to really get rid of Iran's nuclear program, why in the midst of negotiations these campaigns keep popping up? And I think this really speaks to the fundamental incoherence at the heart of Washington's policy toward Iran. On the one hand, I think they're torn or pulled toward a direction of regime change, and on the other, of just containing Iran. And to the best of my knowledge, and I've observed this almost on a daily basis, that central contradiction has never been addressed by this administration, and it's never really clearly stated what it wants for Iran as well as from Iran.
Given what you've just said, and given that these strikes have happened after what have been indirect negotiations between Iran and the US in Geneva, what does this say about the reliability of the United States as a negotiating partner?
It doesn't reflect well. Because on the one hand, you do not have a stable policymaking process in Washington that could really give comfort to your allies or anyone else trying to predict what the next phase of a given development might be. It's also fundamentally incoherent, I think, from inside Washington itself as well. Is this a campaign that's going to have a strong intelligence element taking over after the initial military phase? Are there resources committed to it? Are they prepared for a prolonged campaign that might involve Persian Gulf Arab states at war with Iran? What's going to happen if the global supply of oil is disrupted as a result of this? To the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been any long-term studies, pre-planning that has gone into this in Washington. And so this increasingly looks like shooting first and aiming later, which is sadly has been very much the pattern with this administration over the course of the last 10 years approach to Iran.
We've been speaking with Associate Professor Hussein Banai from Indiana University. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.